Welcome back everybody to our second video. This video, instead of covering an event or a tour, I want to give you a look around the 1987 Super Mod. As I said in the last video, I've been working on this mod for well over a year. There's been quite a bit of changes made, updates. This mod is about as realistic as it can get for this game. The one downfall I found with this game is the fact that it is set up for episodic television. It's not set up for 1980s touring wrestling companies. So what I've tried to do is tweak and configure things as much as possible to make it that way. The intensity of this mod is high. It's a lot of work, and if you are interested in ultimate details, this is the mod for you to check out. If you're not and you just want to buzz through and you're more into the new style of wrestling of episodic television, this super mod probably isn't for you. So let's take a look around here. Let's go through some companies. Let's take a look at the WWF, for example. The WWF in the 1980s, especially around 1987, was just absolutely massive. They had 3 tours going on per night. That's so they had an A card, a B card, and a C card. So obviously you cannot do that in this game, but you can have a tour every night. So let's take a look at the profile of the company. So if I go ahead and take a look at the company here and I click on events and TV, it's going to show me exactly what's going on with the events and the TV. So right now, the WWF has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 television shows per week. Obviously, Saturday night's main event was a quarterly special, but in this game, it's difficult to make that quarterly special happen with the television contract, so I had to set it to every week. But all these other shows are accurate. All these shows ran once a week. Obviously, they would record them in batches at certain times, but each week you had these shows airing either on syndication or through USA. So this is completely accurate with these shows. Also accurate is the commentators on each show for the start date of May 1987. Now, we go down here to the live event tours. Okay, again, like I told you, the WWF had 3 tours, 3 touring cards per night. A card, B card, C card. So once again, you can't do that in this game, but what you can do is make a nightly tour. Now, if you're playing the WWF in this game, you can play every single one of these tour dates. So there's a total here of, it comes out to be about 306 tour dates. So the existing pay-per-views are also here. Survivor Series debuted in 1987. The Royal Rumble debuted in January 1988. They're in here. So when you play the game long enough, you get the opportunity to play them alongside SummerSlam and then WrestleMania. So let's take a look at another company here that's a pretty fun company to look at. And that would be Jim Crockett Promotions, which eventually became WCW. So if we take a look at WCW, that's the wrong one I want to look at. I want to look at view profile here. Crockett was doing the same thing. They were a touring company. They were trying to expand nationally, and this is 100% accurate reflected in their tour. Crockett sometimes ran 2 or 3 cards a night, but it wasn't very often. So it's this is pretty accurate to what they were running during that time period. They ran in May 1987. They ran 3 weekly television shows. One obviously on TBS at 6:05. That was World Championship Wrestling, and then you had Worldwide Wrestling and Pro that were running in syndication at the time. So again, you have the tour dates here. You have the existing big shows that were not pay-per-views yet because Crockett did not have pay-per-view control. Pay-per-view access, I should say. So you end up with 260 tour dates for Jim Crockett Promotions. Something else that needs to be pointed out too in this super mod that's a feature that I enjoy that keeps everything accurate was the fact that they did enhancement challenge matches. When you watched Jim Crockett Promotions, when you watched World Championship Wrestling on 605, most of the matches were squash matches with enhancement talent. You might get one, maybe two matches that were between two established stars, but most of the time these were enhancement talent matches. The purpose of these matches was to get people at home to watch the matches, get interested, and then want to buy a ticket when Crockett came to their town. The WWF was similar, however, it wasn't like that on all their shows. They did show tour matches on some shows, and they also showed star versus star matches on some of their shows, such as Primetime and other shows like that. So, using Jim Crockett Promotions as an example, here's Alan Fox, here's Alan Martin. These were enhancement talent wrestlers. Benny Trailer. Now, a lot of these wrestlers were not in the game that Gennady had originally programmed. I tracked down these enhancement talent wrestlers. I went through hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos, show records, and stuff like that, and added these enhancement talent wrestlers to the roster. Bob Cook, Bob Emery. There's hundreds and hundreds of enhancement talent wrestlers that I added to the game to try to give you as much realism as possible. David Diamond, David Isley. These wrestlers were not in the game. I tracked them down and put them in the game so that you can play accurately when you're playing as Jim Crockett Promotions and have enhancement talent matches. So those are two really big features that were added in the Super Mod. The other important feature here is I added several what was known as Outlaw Promotions back in 1987. It wasn't really known as independent wrestling back then. It was called Outlaw because they weren't affiliated with the NWA or other promotions. So in the Super Mod here, more will pop up when 1988 hits, but right now, if you were to start playing in May 1987, you have the National Wrestling Federation, you have International Championship Wrestling, you have International Wrestling Federation, that was Killer Kowalski's promotion. You have Deep South Wrestling, that was run by Jody Hamilton, also known as the Assassin. Pro Wrestling America, out of Minnesota, was added to the Super Mod here. Wild West Wrestling, which was running against Fritz von Erich, that was Ken Mantell, who used to be Fritz's booker, who then went off on his own and formed Wild West Wrestling. Now, realistically, by July of 1987, Wild Wrestling had pretty much folded, and Mantell went back to work for Fritz von Erich. Now, Windy City Wrestling is accessible in this. Unfortunately, Windy City Wrestling really didn't launch until January 1988, but selfishly, because I'm from the Chicago area, I wanted to play as Windy City Wrestling, so I went ahead and put them in here with a launch date of May 1987, along with their entire roster that did not exist in this game at all before. We can take a look at that real quick here if you want. For example, Bill Robinette, Buster and Ice, these wrestlers, Hurricane Smith, Jimmy Holiday, Lance Allen, his partner, Eddie Strong. None of these people were in the game before. I added all of these wrestlers to the game and their personalities too, like Sam DeCero's in the game. We just went over Bill Robinette. So there is a lot of pro wrestling information that has been added to this super mod based off the original Gennady 1987 mod. There's been just a ton of information that I put into this over time. World Class did not at the time have, they were not doing very well. World Class was in trouble. The original Gennady version did not quite have their roster accurate. Kerry Von Erich was out for far longer. This was during the time where he was recovering from his foot injury. Now ignore this alliance and ignore the bookers and stuff like that. And here, this game has been playing for a couple months, but it just gives you a look at the accurate roster of what World Class had at the time. Another interesting one to play in this game is Championship Wrestling from Florida. Championship Wrestling from Florida was owned by Jim Crockett Promotions at this time and would essentially be shut down in late November by Crockett. They weren't using it as a developmental territory, but they were sending a lot of wrestlers down there to work in Florida. So that's what Championship Wrestling from Florida looks like. In the Gennady version, CWF was already shut down, which wasn't historically accurate. So I brought it back, and then I made sure to put the titles with the full histories into the game. So the Florida title goes all the way back to 1937. That was not a whole lot of fun putting every single one of those dates into the system, but I did it, made it happen. Here's their tag title belts. Again, goes all the way back to 1969. So this is all historically accurate. So the roster is historically accurate. Everything is accurate. Another thing here was Continental Wrestling Association, also known as Memphis, run by Jerry Jarrett, booked by Jerry Lawler. Unfortunately, in this game, you can see that Jerry Lawler has been removed as the booker, but that's for a different reason. The CWA in the Gennady version was shown still as a member of the NWA. The CWA, although it carried an NWA title, was no longer a member of the NWA. They actually had like an alliance, a relationship with the AWA. They were no longer a member of the NWA, but they still did carry the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight title. So that shows you the breakdown of the companies and their status. All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Let's take a look here. Their tours and stuff were not accurate at all in the original version. I went through and actually put in all of their tour dates, historically accurate. Dates on, dates off, everything is accurate to 1987. Take a look at New Japan very quick. New Japan, same thing. This tour is historically accurate. These are the tour dates, these are the tours that New Japan had. I didn't have to mess too much with the Mexican companies. They were pretty right on, but I did have to adjust schedules for them. Some of the schedules were not accurate. So if you're looking for detail and historical accuracy, I don't think you're going to find a better mod for TEW 2020 than you're going to find as far as this one goes. It is pretty darn historically accurate. Relationships are also key. Wrestler friendships are rampant in this game. They are historically accurate of who was friends. So to show you a little bit more here about the accuracy, for example, here's WWF live event 167. So this is real. They ran in the Spectrum in Philadelphia on that date. And this card is pretty accurate. The tours for the WWF are set to less than when you start playing. So they're set to lesser. That way, the pay-per-view will not automatically be applied to each event. The downfall of that is that your major card wrestlers will not be used. If you choose to use the tour option, then you'll never get a decent attendance number. I'm continuing to play around with this mod to see what works and what's best, and I did make adjustments here and switched over a lot of WWF tour dates to the version of Tour just to get the bigger names used here in the game. So not all of them are like that right now in my save, but that's why you're seeing the numbers you're seeing here. The attendance is pretty low for the Spectrum, super low for the Spectrum actually, but you do have the bigger wrestlers being used. For some reason, for tours in this game, it likes to automatically go with a lot of six-man tags. So let's take a look here at, okay, so the NWA had a live event, okay? And see, here's the problem. Pay-per-view buy rate right there. I switched a few of these over to normal events, and now it's doing the pay-per-view thing. So that's a problem. But normally this would be a non-televised event. Okay, you got to experiment with this game. You got to play around and try new things. So that's what we're trying to do. All the television shows are accurate. You know, here's Memphis right here. For some reason, they're taping out of somewhere in Arkansas, which wouldn't have been accurate. That is one thing that irritates me, is I wish they had an option here where you could set the game to accurately record each week where they did record out of, because everybody knows Memphis wrestling was studio wrestling. So but once again, CWA, I went through with a fine-tooth comb, made sure that everything was historically accurate as far as the roster went. So that's about it for this episode. Here's International Championship Wrestling that was owned by the Savoldis, and they had a lot of big name wrestlers. International Championship Wrestling was a good outlaw promotion. They ran for a long time and they had some success. Obviously, you can see in the game they're only drawing 98 people. That's not accurate, but again, you're limited in what you can do because this game is set up for episodic television. All right, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning into this episode and getting an inside look at how the operation of the game goes and the work that was put into the game.